Hi, my name is Sydney, and for my final project, I decided to analyze the Georgia Sex Offender Registry. So in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about the purpose of why I chose this project, data collection, data cleaning, data analyzing, and then also the results of my project. So first off, why I chose this project. I chose to analyze the Georgia Sex Offender Registry because I wanted to see how sex crimes correlated to other crimes and estimated crime rates in Georgia. I'm also just extremely passionate about fighting against sexual violence and child trafficking in Georgia, and I wanted to see the actual registry myself and kind of visualize some of the data. When I initially chose this project, I was mainly interested in how many sexual crimes, specifically rape, are not resulting in any consequences for the perpetrator. Okay, so for expected insights when I first started this project, I really wanted to see where are most sex offenders located in Georgia and what is the most common crime committed by offenders. I also wanted to look at what the correlation between sex crimes and other crimes, such as violent crimes and drug crimes, what it was, because there are some myths about how drug crimes can be related to sex crimes, and I just wanted to see if the data supported that myth or not. And then I also wanted to see what number of perpetrators are not being arrested or placed in the registry compared to the number of estimated sex crimes per year, because this would give a pretty good idea of how many rapes or other sex crimes are happening, and there's really no, follow up for the perpetrator. There's nothing happening to them. Okay, so for data collection process, my CSV I found online on the Georgia Bureau of Investigation website. The dataset was 5.1 megabytes and provided information on every person on the Georgia Sex Offender Registry. It included things like name, sex, race, all the basic demographics. It also included their full addresses and the registration date, crime conviction date, and then some other information about the actual crime. I also found an additional data set that was extremely small and did not have any inconsistencies, so I wanted to make sure that this one did have inconsistencies, which it really did. A bunch of the columns had abbreviated or shortened words for phrases like in the crime column that meant the same thing. I have a few examples in a minute that I can talk about. Since my other additional CSV, which was a lot smaller, was clean and provided by the FBI, and it was the estimated crimes CSV file, it showed all the estimated crimes from 1979 to 2020 and was found on the FBI Crime Data Explorer website and provided information on the estimated number of crimes. For my HTML, I found my HTML website just great by searching for data on every state sex offender registries. The website that I found contained a large table at the bottom containing the total registered sex offenders by state, which is really what I wanted. So I decided to choose that and to try and data scrape it, or web scrape it, sorry. For my JSON, I found my JSON on the FBI Crime Data Explorer website by looking for arrest data for the state of Georgia for the past few years. The JSON I found gave me information on the number of arrests by crime each year since 2003, and I used this data to help find correlation between sex crimes and other crimes. So inconsistencies, specifically in the Georgia Sex Offender Registry, because that's where almost all my inconsistencies were. So in the leveling column, some people had not leveled and some people had cannot level. So this was a big difference legally, but since for the purposes of the project, they both meant that it was not leveled, I just changed all of them to none just for consistency. And then in the crime column, some crimes were shortened to aggravated, where it was shortened to ag, but since they all meant the same word, I just went ahead and used the full version. A very similar example in the same crime column would be sometimes it would say ATT rape, which means attempted rape, and sometimes it would put the full word of attempted rape. Another thing is sometimes it would do ATT-RAP instead of spelling out the full word of rape. So pretty much for any shortened version, I just replaced it with the long version so it was easier to read and completely consistent. Okay, so for my data gathering and cleaning process, the CSV was really the only one I had to clean because all I had to do was really download it to gather the data. And then to deal with the many data inconsistencies in the Sex Offender Registry CSV, I went through the leveling and crime columns and replaced each abbreviated or difference in wording with the same word choice. For example, I replaced every cannot level and not level in the leveling column with not available so that the wording was consistent. Later in phase 3, I ended up having to clean the data set a lot more for certain insights, but for phase 2, this was extremely sufficient. I also then wrote the clean data to a new CSV. For my additional CSV to gather data, all I did was had to download it, and I didn't have to clean the data at all, but I just had to go through it and just make sure that it was only for Georgia. For HTML, to collect the data, I just used Beautiful Soup and web scraped information. In phase 2, I did mess up, and I only searched for the Georgia information on the website when I needed all the states, so I corrected this in phase 3, and then I wrote the new data to a new CSV as well. For my JSON, I gathered the data using the request module with the JSON URL. I had to kind of clean the data by creating a dictionary of each crime each year, and then wrote this dictionary to a pandas data frame and wrote it to a new CSV. I say clean because that's not exactly cleaning. It was more just easier to read for me. Okay, so for the sex offender registry CSV cleaning, here's kind of what it ended up looking like when it was done. As you can see, we had the name, sex, race, etc. For the FBI estimated crimes additional CSV cleaning, I kind of, once again, said all I had to do was find the state of Georgia and make sure and put all that information in. So this was super easy as well. For the original data cleaning of my HTML in phase 2, when I did mess up, this is what I did to only find the Georgia information. But then in phase 3, I revised it and used this code to find it for every single state so that I could compare Georgia to other states and see how Georgia ranks. For the FBI arrest data JSON data gathering, here's the code I used. It was also super simple. Like I said before, I had to use kind of a dictionary and then write that to a data frame, but that was also just so that it looked better to read. Okay, now for the next part, which is my data analysis section. So my first insight, I compare the data from the clean Georgia Sex Offender Registry CSV to the FBI estimated crime CSV. So specifically, I wanted to look at how many sex offenders are placed on the registry each year for rape compared to the estimated number of rapes each year. The end result was a data frame containing data on the offenders convicted of rape, the crime estimated amount, and then the difference each year from 1979 to 2018. Here's what the final result looked like. As you can see, I do later in the PowerPoint have the actual average of this difference column, but as you can see, these are pretty high numbers, which is pretty terrifying to think of, that so many people are committing these crimes but not being placed on the sex offender registry afterwards. So for my second insight, I used the Clean Georgia Sex Offender Registry again and to find the number of sex offenders currently living in each county in Georgia. And then with that number, I created this visualization, which just shows each county in Georgia and how many sex offenders live there currently. For my third insight, I used the Clean Georgia Sex Offender Registry CSV to determine the number of offenders which have completed each crime. This involved another cleaning of the CSV since many crimes are very similar in nature and only differed slightly legally. Some big examples I saw were sexual activity with minor and sexual activity with child. I think legally these do slightly differ based on ages of the person, but for this project, since it was a general purpose and I wanted the data more to be generalized, I would combine them into the same category. And then to better visualize this, since this is a lot of code and a lot of information, I created a pie chart which shows that over 60% of people on the Georgia Sex Offender Registry are on there for committing sexual activity with a minor. For my fourth insight, I used the web scrape data from Safe Home, which was placed into a CSV in my data cleaning process, and compared each state based on the number of total registered sex offenders. So out of this entire list, Georgia ended up ranking 11th, which included the District of Columbia, with 24,334 total registered sex offenders as of February 2023. And then I also thought it was really interesting, just the top 10 states in general, so I went ahead and put those below. Continuing my fourth insight, this is what my code looked like and what I ended up with my data frame looking like. For my fifth insight, which was my last insight, I used the FBI arrest data gathered from the JSON to compare the number of arrests for all sex-related crimes to a variety of other crimes. So I chose to compare it to drug crimes, motor vehicle theft, offenses against the family and children, all weapon crimes, all assault crimes, which I ended up combining just for simplicity, and then all murder and manslaughter crimes, which I also combined for simplicity. I visualized this data in a line graph in Visualization 3 and also created a table in Visualization 4 containing the correlation rate of each crime with all sex crimes, which I will show right now. So this is kind of what my data set ended up looking like my final result from the fifth insight. And then to help visualize it a lot more, I created these visualizations. So the top one just shows, as you can see, the neon green line shows the estimated sex crimes, and then the other lines are just different types of crimes. And the correlation rates can be found in the fourth insight, which is here at the bottom. And as you can see, all motor vehicle theft crimes has the highest correlation rate to sex crimes, which I found extremely interesting. I would not have guessed that at all. Okay, so my conclusion, these are just the big takeaways from my project. So Fulton County has the highest number of registered sex offenders currently residing in it compared to every other county in Georgia. Motor vehicle theft has the highest correlation with all sex crimes, which is 89%, but weapon crimes such as carrying, possession, etc. has an 82% correlation with all sex crimes. I think this one was a lot more predictable, but I still thought it was interesting to include. The average difference between the FBI number of estimated rapes per year in Georgia and the number of rapes resulting in the offender being placed on the sex offender registry is currently 2,375, which is just an astonishing number. That means that that's the average number of people who are committing these crimes and not being placed on the registry. And then, as mentioned earlier, Georgia is currently 11th in the U.S. for total number of registered sex offenders, and also mentioned earlier, nearly 60% of registered sex offenders in Georgia were placed on the registry for participating in sexual activity with a minor, which is so concerning. And then for what I learned in this project, beyond class, I learned how to work with large data sets and how to use different data visualizations, such as the Georgia heat map. Some challenges I faced were using such a large data set. I had a lot of problems with cleaning it. I also had a problem finding a use for all the data. Once it was cleaned, I realized I had a lot more data than I thought. And then I also struggled a lot with finding inconsistent data sets. Okay, that's all. Thank you so much.